Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce and another fantastic goal by Marco Royce. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond compare.
Jetzt kommt das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von Inzo an Götze.
Needs to lay it off. We're going to shot away. Oh, what a goal!
Welcome back to Dortmund Dispatch. Today I'm joined by Zach Lowy, who is the chief editor for Breaking the Lines and has worked with many other media companies you may know, such as the BBC. And he's basically an expert that we've brought in for our second annual How to Fix Borussia Dortmund episode. And last year we thought it was going to be hard to fix Borussia Dortmund, but somehow this season it will be much more difficult. So let's get straight into it. So we're going to start off with the likely transfer exits. So here I just put down Sebastian Haller, Reina, Moukoko, and Soumela Coulibaly, who are all out on loan with the exception of Gio Reyna. And the way this works is you're just going to pitch me a fee for each player really quickly, and I'll kind of decide what I think a fair amount is for these guys. Start with Sebastian Haller.
Sorry, you're asking me?
Zach, I don't know if you want to go first.
Yeah, Zach.
Okay.
Do you how much money do you think we're gonna get for Sebastian Haller, or do you think it's just gonna be wages?
Oof, that's a tricky one. Haller is, he's an interesting player. I've said for a while that, like, if anybody deserves a Netflix movie made about him, it would be Haller, because he's just had a crazy career, getting that incredible season with Luka Jovic at Eintracht Frankfurt, then, of course, going to Ajax, doing incredible stuff there, winning the battle against testicular cancer, winning the AFCON. But yeah, it has to be said, he hasn't done that well at Borussia Dortmund. I think that he's also been marred by that final day of the 22-23 season where Dortmund totally relinquished that opportunity to win the Bundesliga. And of course, Haller, he had a chance to get some value back with his loan at Leganés, and really did not do that well there. So I think that if Dortmund were to sell him, it would probably be for a fairly low fee, probably like, I would say maybe 7 digits, maybe like 7 or 8 million. Because the fact is, he is, I think he's like 28 or 29. He's definitely not in his youth anymore. His wages could be a stumbling block. So yeah, I would not be surprised if he, makes the move to Saudi Arabia or some other team. Maybe he goes to a league like Turkey. But yeah, I don't think that Haller will get that much, which is a shame, because honestly, when he made the move to Dortmund, I had very high expectations. He's somebody who on his day is a really impressive striker, very skilled at holding the ball up and using his physical frame to his advantage, but just hasn't really been able to make it work in Dortmund.
Yeah, he has started playing for Utrecht in the second half, but it's 1 goal in 700 minutes, which you'd like to see something more if we're going to get any feedback, honestly.
I think I'm definitely in line with Zach's line of thinking. I put 10, just in the hopes that he'd be doing decently at Utrecht, which is his former club. I was hoping that maybe they'd want to bring him back if he is performing. But yeah, I haven't really followed his progression there. So as of right now, yeah, I think 8 to 10 sounds about fair to me. It's unfortunate that it didn't work out at Dortmund, and obviously Zach already mentioned all the kind of stuff that he went through. So yeah, the best case scenario in this case is for him to leave and find a club where he can kind of rebuild what's left of his career.
You don't think this would be more like the Thomas Meunier deal when he left, where the club just agrees to pay his wages or his full wages for the next season, and then when his contract expires, they sign him on a separate contract essentially?
Also possible.
Because
But we were talking about it
that's
first,
in
so.
line with the amount of money we're talking about, and I just think the 11
Right.
million owed, if like he shouldn't throw that away. So I'll put in. I think we can budget 5 for that, whether that's in wages cleared or transfer fee or some combination there. But now let's move on to Gio Reyna. His wage is just 2 million per season, roughly. Contract expiring in 2026 with that extension he signed when he went on loan to Forest. The rumored wages 10 to 15, or rumored fee, excuse me, is 10 to 15 million. Zach, what do you think about Gio Reyna?
I would probably go to the under for that. I think we're probably closer to 10 million. Reina is someone who, was considered one of the brightest talents in world football a few years ago and has really never been able to make the step up from wonder kid to, a top level player. I think that he's shown plenty of signs of his elite talent, both for club and the U.S. men's national team. But yeah, I think that overall the biggest ability is availability, and that's something that Reina has never been able to do. He's never been able to steer clear of injuries. He's never been able to put it all together and deliver on a consistent basis. And just like Haller, whose value plummeted from his loan spell instead of increased. Yeah, Reina didn't really take advantage of his loan spell at Nottingham Forest, didn't make a name for himself there. So I think that Reina could be well suited, honestly, to maybe even go back to the US and go to an MLS team where he can be playing week in, week out. I think that perhaps if Dortmund are to get a big fee for Reina, I would imagine it would come from MLS because I just don't think that the market, quite frankly, is really there for a player like him who, we don't really know what his position is. He has not really been able to step up and deliver. In fact, I would say he's done better for his national team than his club. And yeah, honestly, in terms of Reina and his past like 3 or 4 years, the most headlines that have come out of the Reina family have been from, of course, the scandal of the 2022 World Cup where his parents tried to blackmail Berhalter or whatever. We don't have to go over that, but yeah, I think Reina. I would be surprised if you got 15 million for him.
Yeah, just about the same line. I think again I had 10. I do think there were some sort of rumors regarding a move to Milan for a potential 15 earlier around the winter transfer market. But I do think that he hasn't done himself any favors. I don't think he's been particularly impressive even when he's gotten the chances. The one thing that I can say when Brandt hasn't been on and Reina has been on, he's been able to retain the ball a little bit better. So it's a question of whether you have someone who puts in these loose passes that are intercepted and then cause dangerous chances, or you have someone who's kind of just like a little bit invisible on the pitch. And unfortunately, that's really like what I can say about his contributions as of especially this second half of the season. So I think even getting 10 is a good shout for him, and I think that would still go a good way towards bolstering Dortmund's ability to bring in another player. For example, at the 10, that might be a bit better suited to what we need in that position.
I'll go 10 for our budget this season, and we can kick in some add-ons because I do think the commercial value of a Gio Reyna is still there given the United States market and
For
how
sure.
much money can be gleaned there from sponsorships, kit revenue, all that type of stuff. But now we can move on to Yusufa Mukoko, who has not played at all in the second half of the campaign for Nice. I believe it's like 2 or 3 goal contributions in about 200 minutes there this season. I put down 8 to 18. The wages are at 4.5 million. His contract expires in 2027. I personally would not be surprised if it's a straight loan move for the next season.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree with that. I think that Mukoko is someone who, yeah, I think similarly to a lot of Dortmund players, but in general, just wonder kids who burst onto the scene at an incredibly early age and, are already scoring for fun when they're 16, 17. It can be very difficult to deal with the height of expectations. But yeah, Mukoko, of course, went to Nice this season. And I think overall, you should be able to get a fairly decent fee, let's say maybe 10, 12 mil. I think that would be generous, but yeah, just like Reina, he's a player who hasn't really been able to make the transition from wonder kid to an elite level striker. But I do think that a lot of teams still value his potential, his skills, but with that being said, it's been, I think, 6 or 7 years since Mukoko was bursting onto the scene as, one of the best young strikers in Germany. And it seemed like he was going to be able to, take that mantle, and follow in the footsteps of Lewandowski and Aubameyang and become Dortmund's next top striker. And yeah, he hasn't been able to do that. So I think similarly to Reina, like 10 mil would be a very good fee for Mukoko. And yeah, it just makes sense to cut ties with him. I don't think that personally, I don't know if another loan spell would be in his best interest.
Still only 20 years of age, I believe.
So with Mukoko, interestingly, I actually put keep instead of trying to get a fee for, and the reason for that being is both the contract length, his age, and the ability that he has shown, albeit in flashes. I still think there's a player there for Dortmund to possibly reintegrate if they can. But that'll also depend on how many games we have to offer next season. So, like for example, if we did qualify for Europa League, having an additional player, to play striker would be great. We do have Maxi Bayer, but as we've seen both under Nuri Sahin and now under Niko Kovac, he's more so being used out wide, and it'll really depend on obviously who Dortmund choose to bring in out on the wing as well. Whether or not Bayer will still get those minutes out there, or he'll once again predominantly be used, just as a backup to Girassi. But also it'll also depend on how Dortmund are playing. So, for example, if going into next season, whoever we do end up having as our head coach wants to play with a front two, having that additional striker could be beneficial. And once again, I still think Mukoko is young and that there is potential there. I do think there obviously were some burnt bridges as of last summer and how this move transpired and the things that his agent said, but I don't think it's irreparable if the club want it to be irreparable. So I wouldn't be averse to keeping him around depending on how many games we have in the coming season.
So I'm gonna have to be the tiebreaker here, and I will go. The 18 million purchase option is obviously going to be rejected by Nice, but I'll stick with Zach's and just go with 10 mil because of what I think. Not necessarily what I would do 100%, because I'm not opposed to just giving him all the league stage minutes in a Europa Conference League or a Europa League if it came to that. But I just think that the club's not going to keep him, and I don't want to get my hopes up on a player who is still young. And with that short stature, I do think he has plenty of time to mature later in his career, even though he was obviously dominating the United teens since he was 14, essentially. So I'll put him down for another 10 million to the budget. That's considerably lower than the option that was rejected, so I think that's still fairly realistic. And now let's look at Sumela Koulibaly. In his second campaign in the Champions League, he's dealt a bit with injuries. His salary is very low, which should help boost up our fee compared to some of the previous guys we've talked about. His contract's also expiring in 2026. I think the club really regrets that Burnley pulled out of the move to sign him for, I think it was like 20 mil. And since then, his value has decreased and decreased. But what do you think about Sumela Koulibaly?
Yeah, Koulibaly is someone who really hasn't been able to register. I don't think he's really even made a name for himself at the top level. So yeah, I think that Koulibaly, perhaps another loan spell might be in order. Because just like I don't know if the transfer fee that you guys could get would be worth selling. I think it might make more sense to loan him out, see if you can increase his value somewhat more. You know, he is fairly young. So yeah, I would probably go with a loan for Koulibaly.
Uh, I had him down for 10. I don't really have much else to say about him specifically. I don't see him really like making it at Dortmund at this point. I do think that there are other options, especially in the academy, that Dortmund are focusing on to bring up as possible secondary options. And that contract length, to me says unless they extend him, that yeah, they're probably going to want to try and get a fee of some sort for him. But regardless of that, based on the contract, length, his previous injury history, his history, I guess, with Dortmund in general, I think 10 it would be a fair number for him.
I think the club is going to sell because they're desperate for cash. So like maybe what Zach's saying, where if they had the patience to wait another year and were in a better position financially, you could see an additional loan because this is his like first real injury hit campaign. But this is still a 21-year-old left-footed center back who can play with the ball at his feet and has 1,000 Champions League minutes. So I would have bumped him a little higher than Brian had. But since Zach doesn't think the value's there, we'll go in the middle with what Brian said at just 10 mil. So I think that's pretty fair. And now we can get to the more complicated ones. We have the midfield exits. We have Emre Can, contract expiring in 2026 on a hefty wage. We have Salih Özcan on a roughly half the wage, a little bit less, also expiring in 2026. You have Julian Brandt's contract expiring in 2026 on 7 mil a year. You have Pascal Gross expiring in 2026 with an option to extend, I believe, based on how many minutes he plays next season. You have Felix Mecha on 6 million, one of the lower earners in the midfield, contract expiring in 2028. And then Marcel Sabitzer, who is my most criticized player this season, on 7.5 million with a contract expiring in 2027. The ages on a lot of these guys is pretty similar. They're almost all outside of Nemecha, who's now I think 25, 26 next season. They're all 29 to 34, and that's not necessarily a very athletic midfield, and that's given us some issues this season. Brian, as the Dortmund Dispatch regular host, who would you start off selling? Because you've obviously watched a ton of Borussia Dortmund this season.
I don't think it's gonna come as a surprise. I think Emre Can has to be on that list. I know the club has, already started toying with the idea of a possible extension per, some of the reports that we've seen come out. And I know he's been playing a little bit better in the second half of the season, but at the end of the day, he's aging. He's shown that he's inconsistent. And I think we already have, or not that we already have, well, I do think we already have better options at center back per se, which is where we are playing him anyway, once those players are fully fit and ready to go. But at the end of the day, kind of like what I said, he's already aging. He's shown his inconsistencies. I think this is a good time to move on. And the value I put on is 15. Initially, I was thinking less, but because of the fact that he has been playing a little bit better, maybe there is some sort of market out there for him in like a Serie A, for example, which is something that we've talked about in the past. So 15 for me and gone.
Yeah, I think I'd probably say like maybe 12 or 13 mil. And yeah, I think it would make sense to cut ties with Emre Can. He has been a decent leader, but I think overall he is lacking in positional discipline, can be a little bit rash to tackle players. And yeah, I think that overall for the wages that he's making, Dortmund, they don't they really should try to move on from him. This has been obviously a terrible season for Dortmund, and I think that it's important to rip off the Band-Aid and just try to go with a huge overhaul of their squad. I do think that it would make sense to get rid of Chan. I think that they do have enough leaders in the team already that they don't need to keep hold of someone who is, yeah, entering the twilight of his career. So yeah, if it was up to me, I would definitely move on from Chan.
Okay, I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna go 14. That's right in the middle of the two of you guys, and I'm gonna give two other pitches for guys that I would really like to get rid of. And first, it's Marcel Sabitzer. So you have 2 more years on his contract. That's going to be his age 32 and 33 season. We've already seen significant declines in him physically. Now, I know the XG underperformance this season will knock something off his value, but I think if you connect his international reputation, the fact we were in a Champions League final last year with him playing a ton of minutes, this is a guy that similarly, I think, can find a second life in Italy in a slightly less physically demanding league. Not saying anything about the quality, just the physicality of it is a little different. It's a little less transitional than Germany. And I think he can go back to being the player, or getting closer to being the player he was if he goes somewhere in Italy. So I would pitch Sabitzer out for about 10. That would also clear a significant amount of wages and allow you to get a profile that fits your team more in midfield. The other guy I'm going to say here is one of the few guys that's looked decent this season, but he has only looked decent, and that's Felix Nemecha. And one of the issues here is he's never hit 2,000 league minutes in a season, and the rumored fee of Manchester United coming in, I don't think we're going to get anywhere near the rumored fee. I think that might be coming more from his agent rather than club sources with Manchester United. But I still think this is a guy who we can get a little bit of a profit on from what we signed him for, just by him moving up to a team with some better financials and having grown his name a bit more, especially in England with those excellent performances last year against Newcastle in the group stage of the Champions League. And that's Felix Nemecha, because he's just not been on the pitch enough, and relying on a guy in a crucial position to play regularly who has never hit 2,000 league minutes in a season, I think is a little irresponsible.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with that. Especially, I mean, listeners will know I am a big Sabitzer fan. But at the end of the day, it just hasn't been it this season from him. And I do think that he does need to seek pastures new at this point, just because, it just doesn't seem like the legs are there as much anymore. And I do think a less physically demanding league like Italy, as Eli mentioned, could be a good space for him to kind of flourish again. And then with Nemecha, I'm very much, happy with seeing him go as well, just because the injuries, the inconsistency regarding his play, I think those are all signs that perhaps, moving him on and getting a little bit of a profit, if that's possible, especially if United, for example, are interested, this would be the time to do that. With him going, I had him going for 40, and then with Sabitzer, I had closer to 7, being kind of, my pain threshold as to, like, if someone came in and offered a 7 for Sabitzer, then I'd be like, yeah, probably time to go. But yeah, I'm in agreement with that. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, no, I would definitely move on from both. I think Sabitzer probably like around 8 or 9 million. Nemecha probably around the same fee. I was perplexed by the Nemecha signing when it happened, because I don't think he really reached the level at Wolfsburg that would have necessitated a big move to a team like Dortmund. With regards to Sabitzer, I think that he did quite well in his debut season, but yeah, it was very important in them reaching the Champions League final. But overall, I think he's also kind of struggled with the managerial turnover, with having to adapt to so many new systems. And whereas he looked, like a fish in water with Edin Terzic, he's kind of looked like a fish out of water in the past few managers. And yeah, the legs have definitely gone, which is a massive part of Sabitzer's game. So yeah, I would expect them to move on from both. I think that Dortmund kind of brought in both players to replace Jude Bellingham's impact, and neither have really been able to make it work and solidify them as a vital cog. So I would definitely move on from both players.
We think we'll call Nemecha for 40. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's what I had. So,
Okay.
yep.
So we'll put in Nemecha for 40. We'll keep Gross, Brandt, Oshchan in our midfield. So we're going to have to do some improving there, bring in some new names. So the other two guys we have under major and minor exits, I have four guys down. So first, Ostrazinski, his contract's up. This is just our academy goalie. I think he might actually get renewed and play another season for our second team. Our other second team goalie, he will be leaving. Forgetting his name, but good riddance. Complained about not getting a move last summer, and got chipped from 40 yards when I watched him play in person. I did not need to fly 2,000 miles halfway across the world to see that. And then we have the two actual guys that would be major exits. I did not touch on Julian Hetver. He's the guy who kept our second team in the third tier this season. He's leaving. He's going to the Bundesliga, but not for Borussia Dortmund, unfortunately. He's been injured in the second half of the campaign, but that really has hurt his chances to stay at Dortmund because I think that he's a guy that could have moved up to the first team and given us something. Still just 21 years of age, but let's get to the names that you guys all care more about, and that's Jamie Gittins and Gregor Kobel. So do you want to start with Gregor Kobel, Brian?
Yeah, I'm firmly in the keep category, and I think the argument for that is very much he's having a worse season. I'm not going to say a terrible season. He's having a worse season this season. His numbers obviously aren't great, and I think that's as a result of the entire team struggling as well. I do think that bringing in the right pieces in front of him to give him the right cover will help out a ton. And I'm not ready to write him off after one season, especially considering he's very much shown to be a player very much committed to the Dortmund cause and someone who is genuinely world class on his day. I think it just wouldn't be the best decision to give up on him, especially just because he's having this bad season. So I'm firmly in the keep category for him.
Yeah, I would probably move on from Kobel. I think that he definitely has what it takes to be one of the better goalkeepers in Europe, and he proved that last season, arguably the best goalkeeper in the Champions League. But I do think that he's definitely shown some signs of decline, and I worry that if he continues to decline even further, then he'll become almost an unsellable asset. But I think that given the fact that it's only been a year since that incredible campaign, I think that he would get a lot of interest. And I think that overall, Dortmund, they are going to have to sell at least one key player. And I would personally rather sell Kobel than Gittins. I think that fact is there are a lot of cheap goalkeepers who could provide the same level that Kobel is, and perhaps even younger than him. So yeah, I think that just looking at the current squad, there aren't that many players who are going to go for significant fees. Like for example, Felix Nemecha, I think Dortmund would be lucky to get 20 million for him. And other players like Slavitzer or Chan, who are perhaps older, but Kobel, I think, will have a lot of interest. I would expect a lot of Premier League teams to be looking at him. And yeah, I would, in an ideal world with Dortmund, making it to the Champions League, which they still theoretically could, I would perhaps keep hold of him. But right now, I think that they're gonna have to be some tough decisions, and yeah, I would probably get rid of Kobel.
Yeah, I think that Kobel's not necessarily in physical decline. He's not yet 30, and goalies don't decline typically until about 33, 34 would be where you see that on the age curve. but I just think he's so replaceable from what we've seen this season. Like, do I think next season he's a positive post shot XG goalie again? Yes, but this season he hasn't been, and his stock is still high enough. You still see some of the Manchester United and the Chelsea links, and his post shot XG over has always been better in terms of the goals he's conceded in the Champions League than in the league, and that to me is a guy who maybe isn't the most committed to the project at Borussia Dortmund, who's not able to focus on a week in week basis for Borussia Dortmund. Maybe he goes to a better club and is able to lock in and is fully focused. And I think he will be better no matter what next season, but I think that the fee you're going to get of 50 to 60 million, I'll let Zach pick a number in that range, is just going to be too much to not sell him because of how much easier it is to find a goalie who can replace him.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Kobo, I would say probably around 20, 25 mil. And I think that would be a fair value. Like, the thing is with regards to the goalkeeper position, I think that there are a lot of good goalkeepers in the Bundesliga as well as, lower leagues. So I would be confident, honestly, in BVB being able to get themselves a decent goalkeeper with the mindset and the overall skills to, not be a downgrade whatsoever.
So you have him only going for 20 to 25?
Yeah, I don't think that I mean in terms of goalkeeper positions, I mean I could perhaps see him maybe going for 30 million, but the thing is also with transfers is, you have to be um it's also it's not important just how you're doing, it's also important how your team is doing. And like for example, when Inter sold Andre Onana to Manchester United for I think 40 million, like he was coming off a really good season with Inter where they made it to the Champions League final. And I mean, with regards to Kobel, let's face it, this is Dortmund's worst season in a decade. So I just think that there are going to be other goalkeepers who will be more will be more attractive to sign. Someone like Lucas Chevalier, someone like Diogo Costa, maybe. I do think that Kobel would be in that conversation, but with that being said, he is 27, which isn't that young for a goalkeeper. So yeah, I think 25, 30 mil, that would probably be a good price for him.
I'd have to go higher because we're talking about like Mamadashvili, who like I hear what you're saying about the clubs doing well, helps create the narratives to drive those fees up. But Borussia Dortmund, from an economic standpoint, has a little bit more revenue than even an Inter Milan, and that was a bigger market back in the day. And Manchester United involved in Onana, which is another one of the players you're talking about. But Georgi Mamadashvili played for a Valencia side that fought relegation for last season, was definitely in the bottom half, and he moved for 30. And Gregor Kobel has played in the Champions League final. He has played, I believe, 3 full campaigns worth of UCL football. And I think you're going to have to pay for that. So I think that I'll go a little lower to be in line with some of the things you're talking about, Zach. So I'll go 40. I think we can agree there. Brian's kind of smirking a little bit. He's like, I'd keep him at 40, but I think that's
I would, but
fair.
yeah, fair point.
So we'll go 40 for Koval, and we'll move on finally to Jamie Gittins. This to me really depends on the fee on offer, because if you get up over that 70, I think he becomes very replaceable. But if it's down at 50, then maybe you wait a season and see what happens. But I don't know. What do you think, Brian?
Uh, I have him in the sell category, and that's closer to like if we get something, north of 80 million, because those sort of numbers have been, touted in like different reports that have been put out there. I don't think he's worth 80 million at all, and I think that is an extortionate number that you can't say no to. Obviously, very good player, very young, still learning and still very much able to develop. But at the end of the day, I feel like he's going to leave anyway. And if a club is already willing to pay that sort of money, and we're in the dire straits that we are right now, we could move him on for that 80 and then put a lot more of that money into other positions of need and then still get, a very, serviceable winger that will do the job for the club next season, particularly, especially even if we just make it into the Europa League. Like, there are so many options out there, I think, on the wings for Dortmund to look at that, a fee of like 80 million is almost impossible to say no. The other thing that I will say is, once again, we're talking about a player that started off this season very hot, but has been streaky and has shown, I guess, a little bit of like, I want to say like temper issues moving into the second half of the season. Obviously, when a player comes off the pitch and all that, you don't want to see them happy about it. But also, like, I guess some of the body language, both when he's been on the pitch, when he's coming off the pitch, even in the games where he hasn't necessarily influenced them to the point where, based on his talent and what he's, supposedly worth, you would expect him to influence it at. He hasn't been that guy. So for me, if someone came over and said, "Hey, 80 million for Jamie Gittins to go to some Premier League club, be it Tottenham, whoever," I would have to say yes.
I will give Zach a little bit more context around this. So we're at 137 million of sales, and we are going to have to knock a considerable amount off that when we start to go to sign players, because of the financial situation of not being in the Champions League next year, being all but guaranteed. So Zach, what do you think about Jamie Gittins? Does Dortmund keep him past this summer?
I love Gittins. I think he's one of the most talented players in the Bundesliga, and yeah, started off this season in incredible form. Coming off the bench, and I think bagging braces on his league debut and Champions League debut. I think that if the highest bid that you get is like 50 million euros, I would keep him. And more than that, I would sell.
Agreed.
But I think that Gittins is, he's a brilliant talent, and I do think that in a more cohesive unit, he would look like a potential superstar. I think that, he could very well be Dortmund's next, wonder kid after Bellingham, Sancho, Usmane, Holland. There have been so many. For me, he definitely has world-class potential, but yeah, has definitely fallen off in terms of his form since the start of the
First
new year.
campaign as a starter.
Um,
Sorry, I was just trying to add that one thing.
yeah, but no, no, no. I just think Gittins, he's a very good player. Hasn't really been able to offer that secondary goal threat outside of Girassi that we saw at the start of the season. But I think if you can get north of 50 million, I would perhaps sell. But I think ideally the goal should be keeping hold of him and trying to build a system around him and Girassi in attack under with a better team around him.
Do you think Dortmund get offered 70 this summer?
70 million? No, I don't think so. I think maybe at the max would be 60 million. That would be, unless of course, maybe a Saudi team comes around, but I just think that Gittins, he isn't, I think that if he had, kept his form going from the start of the season, then yeah, I could have envisioned 70 or 80 million. But at the moment, I think that Gittins would probably be, if he does go, it would probably be for around 60 million or so.
We still have some games left this season. I think like he could very easily come off the bench against Barcelona, score one goal, and all of a sudden, like every English newspaper is calling him £100 million player, and he gets sold for 80. I think I can put him down for 70. I think is a fair amount. because I think you're going to have a lot of different Premier League clubs interested this summer. City are going to have some big names leaving, clearing up a ton of wages, which could give them some money to spend. You could see Liverpool with Salah potentially leaving the club. What his future's up in the air still. They have a guy at right wing in the Championship who's been pretty good, but they may want that big name signing. He has a ton of talent. Tottenham have a ton of money to spend. He is English. They're not going to want to finish in 14th again, or wherever they are currently. Manchester United, if they sell one of their big academy players, might be looking to make a splash there. So I think you have a ton of different competition, and that's where some of the narratives around fees can kind of grow and build and turn into that big fee for a player. So I'll put him down for 70 if that's okay with everyone. Okay, so that will bring our total budget to 207 million euros. And now we have to look at the other things that are going on around the club. So that'll be Chukwuemeka's 3.1 million wage plus 1.2 million loan fee. That'll be removed from the club just to give us a little bit more cushion in reducing our wage bill. There is a rumor that's been put out that essentially most senior players, with the exception of Nicolas Sula, who just has a better agent, will have a clause that reduces their wages by about 20 to 25% if we don't make the Champions League. So that's going to give us, that's already been accounted for in terms of the budget. We're going to go with the Europa League budget for this one, which gave us a 30 million deficit, and that's going to be covered by the Daniel Malen money that we did not save or did not spend when Ryan Cherky did not join the club. So that'll give us an extra 23 million euros, which actually brings us to a nice round number of 230 million euros. We also probably have Sancho installments still coming in from the sell-on clause and Jude Bellingham installments because transfer fees aren't paid entirely up front, but that will already have been accounted for in that initial rumor that came out about the Borussia Dortmund budget needing to make up 30 million. So if you subtract that 30 million that we are short, we're going to have 200 million to spend. So let's start it off in goal. Zach, do you have a goalie that you think Borussia Dortmund should sign?
Oof, that's a very good question. I think that there are a lot of interesting goalkeepers, but I think that also they have to be Dortmund kind of have to be realistic. They're not going to get someone. They probably won't get someone like Lucas Chevalier or Diogo Costa, but I think that I would perhaps look at Ligue 1. I think there are a lot of very intriguing goalkeepers there, such as Yvan Diouf from Rennes. He's a very nice.
On my list.
Yeah. Marcin Bulka as well on Nice. And trying to think of other players who might be worth looking at. Yeah, I'm not too sure, but I
my
think,
my other
yeah.
just while we're on League One goalies, I'd put out the name Yahia Fofana, who's at Angers,
Mhm.
contract expiring 2026.
Yeah.
Just to throw him in there because we're talking about League One goalies. That guy's had a pretty good season. 24 years of age puts him a little bit younger than Yvan Diouf. He's playing for a worse team, so he has more post shot XG, but more post shot XG face, more XG face, and he's a little bit taller. But I'll give it back to you. I just wanted to get my League One goalie shout in there for you.
Yeah, and I would also probably say Guillaume Resta is very nice young goalkeeper on Toulouse. And the last one I would say is Mads Ermansen. He's a very promising goalkeeper at Leicester, who I think will probably be relegated, which will definitely reduce his value somewhat.
So Zach, if you had to choose one that was like your candidate for signing, which one would you choose?
I would probably go with Restes. I think he's a very good shot stopper, really good reactions, and I think he's going to be one of the best goalkeepers in the world.
Okay, cool. Good shout. Good shout. Um, so I didn't think I'd be able to push my Slavic agenda here, but now that we've kind of put Gregor Kobel in the sell list, uh, yeah, I think Kamil Grabara from Wolfsburg is a great option for Dortmund to look at. Bundesliga proven, good with his feet, good shot stopper. Would probably be more on the more, I guess, like expensive side considering his contract length, I believe, is until 2020.
Yeah, just signed last summer, Brian. I'm out.
Yeah, well, I'm going to put him out there anyway as my option because I do think that that would still be something that would be completely possible just because whether Dortmund is in Europe or not, it's a step up from Wolfsburg, and I think he'd be a great signing. I think with the deficits that we see with Kobel with his feet, Grabara does have far better ability to play with his feet and to play out from the back. So I do think that that would be a good shout. And once again, Bundesliga proven. So
I think when he was at Copenhagen last season, they did draw Bayern in the Champions League, so you get to have those clips out there. I like the name Yvan Diouf. I would be very happy to go in that direction, but I'm going to put together a different name that I actually found. He's at Espanyol. That's Jean Garcia. His market value on Transfermarkt is just 10 million. He has 4.6 post-shot XG saved from 40.6 total post-shot XG faced. He's 6'3", has a bit of size, and is a true Spanish player. Like, he's not afraid of the ball at his feet. I don't think he needs to be perfect. I don't think he necessarily is yet, but he's right at that age where in the next season or so he should break out. And I think the one issue for me would be his contract is through 2028. I don't know what his release clause would be, because you do need one, I believe, in Spain. But that would be my shout. But I'd be very happy to go for Yvan Diouf because his contract expires in 2027. So you should be able to get him for a little bit less than Jean Garcia. He's also 2 years older, which should help you in negotiations as well. But I'd be happy going for either Diouf or Garcia. The issue with Restes for me is he's conceded this season 22 goals from 18.5 post-shot expected goals. He's barely 20 years old, so I think he will be fine. But Borussia Dortmund really need to make Champions League football next season. Like, they can't have a guy who's going to be good in 2 years, even if he's going to be much better than any of the guys that I've said. Just because I think you need to make sure that you're getting Champions League football. And, like, yes, it's only 3.5 more than post-shot XG, but he's faced very little in terms of what's coming up against him in terms of Restes. So I think I'd go for Yvan Diouf if we can agree on that, Zach.
Yeah, Diouf is nice, and I would actually go with John Garcia over Diouf. I think that Garcia is a really nice shot stopper. For my money, he has been arguably the best goalkeeper in Spain, and I think that he's gonna go somewhere. He's gonna go to a big team, and it could very well be Dortmund. Would probably expect a Premier League team to be in for him, but I think that he has been a brick wall for Espanyol, and if they do manage to avoid the drop, he will be probably the biggest reason for that.
Do you think 10, or excuse me, not 10, do you think 15 to 20 would be fair
Yeah,
for Garcia?
yeah, I think so. Even if they do go down, I would expect Espanyol to demand a hefty fee for sure.
Yeah. We'll put him down for 15 and give him a lot of add-ons because uh we'll give him the big add-ons if we make Champions League next year, but we'll put down 15 mil for Garcia and subtract that off our budget. So next we're gonna go. Do we want to go center back or do we want to go into the midfield first? Because I might go into the midfield first just because we got rid of so many bodies there. So okay, we'll do that. Brian, do you want to start with your number 6 recommendation?
Sure. In terms of number 6, I actually went with the player that we've been rumored to possibly be already signing, and that's Ezekiel Benzuzi. I do think we need a refreshing new face there, and I'm very happy to go young and energetic in that position, just because of how stagnant that overall position for us has been. The rumored fee of around 10 to 15 million euros is very much, totally doable for me. And very progressive, ball carrying player, and also has a lot of, is very good at working with the ball at his feet. So I think that's something we've kind of lacked, especially in our defensive midfielders at times this season. So seeing a little bit more of that, especially in a young, youthful, vibrant player as he is, because I think he's only 19, 20, something like that. I think that would be a good addition for and an affordable addition for Dortmund this coming summer.
Not a bad shout. Zach, who would your number 6 addition be for Borussia Dortmund?
If I had to go with anyone, it would be Morten Hjulmand. I think he's been a brick wall for Sporting. He's been just all action, constantly alert to the danger. And yeah, as someone who watches a good deal of Liga Portugal, he's definitely someone who could easily make the jump to a Premier League team, a Bundesliga team, whatever. I think he's just someone who excels at so many different functions, whether that's transporting the ball from the first third to the final third, to, just winning ground duels. I think that he would be a huge upgrade over the likes of Chan and Özcan. So yeah, I really rate him highly.
So my shout for this, I looked at a couple different players, and I looked at Tyler Morton. He hasn't played this year for Liverpool, but had a good season a couple years ago. I looked at Amadou Kone, who's just breaking into the first team at Reims. And I looked at Alan Varela because Dortmund were linked with him. He's very physical, big, has a little bit of UCL experience, but I have to go with Dario Esugo. I don't know if he ever learns how to pass, but if he ever does, he would genuinely be one of the best defensive midfielders in the world. That's kind of his issue. He does retain the ball well in terms of completing passes. He's just not really going to progress it for you. He's on loan at Las Palmas this season. He's on under contract with Sporting through 2027. He's a true ball winning guy. He's very busy. I think his ceiling is like a worse Conte, because no one's ceiling is Conte. But that's the type of profile he is. He's just not quite as good at carrying the ball. His market value on Transfermarkt's just 8 million. I think you can get him for 15 to 20 million. I think that Sporting would be a lot more keen to hold on to him, to hold on to Hjulmand, excuse me, than Esugo. And I think there are still some questions about Hjulmand's passing, whereas like Esugo, just 20 years of age, maybe he develops as a passer. This is a guy with 2 full seasons of senior football, last year in Portugal with Estrela Amadora, and this year on loan with Las Palmas. I think how active he is, I think you can't go away from that, and just gives Dortmund the physicality we've been missing in midfield for the last 5 years since Witzel left.
Eli, I'm sorry to rain on your parade, but Dario Esugo is going to Chelsea alongside his Sporting teammate Giovanni Kenda. So unless you want to bring him on loan or something, he's going.
Not official yet, I believe.
Oh, maybe.
No, it is
I thought
now.
it was
Official.
official. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I think they
With
landed Kenda and Esugo in a double swap.
70 mil.
Yeah. But yeah. I have been watching Esugo since he was like 15 or 16, and I highly rate him. So it's definitely would have been a good move. Still possibly could have been if you want to, pull a Chukwuemeka and bring him in on loan from Chelsea. But yeah, I think that he's a top young player for sure.
I think his loan move to Strasbourg would be all but official then.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely.
All right, so who are we going for?
Then I'd kind of go for Amadou Kone and just take the shot on the guy to have the breakout season. He's also over 5 tackles and interceptions in 700 senior minutes, just 19 years of age. Very ball secure again. he's listed at 5'9". I think he must have grown since that got listed, because when I was watching his League One highlights, he looks very large.
So let's pen him in then.
I don't know. Who was your shout, Brian?
Ben Zuzi. But
no, let's go with Ben Zuzi, because that's the rumored link. I like the player. Kone maybe a year away. We can keep tabs. I've spoken on the podcast about Hillman before. I'm not a fan. Unfortunately, but Zach, you have to go. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can they find your work?
For sure, guys. It was a real pleasure to come on and chat about Borussia Dortmund. You guys are doing some fine work, so hopefully, I can come on again soon. But you can find me on Zach Lowy,
for sure.
ZACHLOWY, as well as my articles on RG and FOTMob and plenty other places. But I think that I really hope that Dortmund can get their stuff together.
Okay, let's move on and discuss our number 8s that we want coming in. Brian, who do you want to be the next great box-to-box midfielder at Borussia Dortmund?
I'm going big for this one because this is a player that I very much have admired for some time and I think would do really well on this Dortmund side, and that's Quinten Timber. I think, just overall, he is the complete package. 6 goals and 1 assist in the Champions League and Eredivisie this season. 8 goals and 10 assists, I believe, last season from central midfield. So obviously a very creative player, but he also has that physicality, ability to be able to make that tackle, especially for losing a player like Nemecha. I think bringing in someone like Quinten Timber would be a fantastic shout. His contract is until 2026, so there is a good chance of him leaving. I think obviously we'd be better placed to entice him to come and join a club like Dortmund if we have some sort of European competition. But considering we are kind of playing within the confines of possibly having at least that Europa League, I think, it still is a step up for him to come and join Dortmund. I'm seeing a fee of around 30 million just because of that contract being up in 2026. I believe his market value is 32. So anywhere I think between 30 and 35 is realistic for this player. And if we were able to pay that sort of money for Nemecha, this is very much a player that has Champions League experience, obviously very creative, is able to put in a tackle, very progressive in general. If we just take a look at some of his numbers, you're talking about 7 goal contributions, 2.72 progressive passes per 90, 1.36 progressive carries, and 1.97 successful take-ons, 1.82 tackles per 90, which is just below Nemecha's 2.05.
I mean, that'll go up when he gets to a real league.
Exactly, 100%. But regardless, overall, I just think he is the complete package, and I think if we're going to be spending a big sum anywhere, it really does need to be in the midfield, and I would highly advocate for him to be the player that we sign.
The one thing, and I think this was higher last season for him, but the progressive passing, did you say 2.7? That's not...
It has fallen a little bit, but based on his last season and his capability to do
what was it the season before?
I don't have the numbers exactly for the season before, but if you're talking about a player that has 8 goals and 10 assists, you gotta be far more progressive and far more forward thinking. But I don't have the numbers in front of me right now. But overall, I do think he's very much a far more progressive player than those numbers would indicate at this point in time. And the Dortmund fan base has already kind of, when Nemecha has been doing well, we've been like, oh, he's fantastic all over. He's not far behind in terms of the numbers, in terms of Nemecha, and I do think he's better in certain areas. I think his tackling, his ball handling, or not ball handling, I should say, his ability to hold up the ball and retention and making sure, that there's ball security in the midfield is better, in my opinion. So I think overall, if we're selling Nemecha for a fee of 40 million, whatever it is that we said, and we're paying between 30 and 35, we're paying less for a better player, in my opinion. So I think he's a great shout.
Yeah, that could be because FBref doesn't have the best data anymore for the, let's see, his Champions League stats. Oh, just 2.73. So it could be because it's only pulling for this season. his Champions League stats. 2.73, still not great. You'd like to see that a little higher when you're committing such an amount on a guy who is at an age where he should be showing you a lot. He is at an age also, though, that I wanted a little bit of an older player here, because one of the names I'm going to say is very young. I might save him for a little bit of a wild card shout later, but the other guy I have here, his contract's only up in 2028. He's a Borussia Mönchengladbach fan. He came through the academy. I believe his brothers are coming through the academy in a couple years' time, if not graduating in the near future. And it's Rocco Reitz. Yes, it's a lot of Bundesliga guys. The other guy I say I wanted to sign more, but I don't want to get too young. The other guy I really like. I might say the name now, but Rocco Reitz is 4 tackles and interceptions per 90, which is very, very good. He's from the region. A little Marco Reus action from Mönchengladbach to Borussia Dortmund. He's at 4.79 progressive passes per 90, which isn't exceptional, but it's still very good. His market value on transfer marks just 15. And maybe he wants to stay for another year because they sneak into Europe, but I don't think they will because they're a negative XG difference side, and he could leave for a considerable amount of money, which will make him really appreciate it. It's something you need to do with a player who loves their club, is just make sure that when they go for a decent sum of money. He only has a goal and assist. I think his goal and assist numbers were better last year, but I want Dortmund to be a difficult side to play against. This is a guy, again, last year, 9 goal contributions, so he can do that, but he can play a deeper role. He can assist Benzuzi in build-up, who we just brought in. He can help the other guy I'm going to say for this number 8 role, who I really love. I think we could do both Rocco Reitz and the other name I'm about to say for that 40 million, and I think that the two of them would be a good pairing, and it would really couple well with some of the other options, and it allows you to kind of get rid of a certain Salias Chan because Rocco Reitz can play that 6 role, can play the 8 role. Benzuzi can probably do that as well, and having these two guys in the double pivot next to each other who can both play 6 and 8, I think would really help the team. The other name I'm going to say, it's Lennon Miller. You may not be familiar with Motherwell legend, has already captained Motherwell at 18, is in his second full campaign with the senior team there, and is with the Scottish senior national team at just 18 years of age. So what makes him special is his passing ability. Yes, he's playing on cow patches in Scotland, but this guy can kick the ball all over the pitch, and he's playing for a dreadful team there. His pass completion rate in the defensive third is 87%, so you can see that ball security there, and that's probably, if you remove the games against Celtic and Rangers, that basically means he's never turning the ball over when he's playing against the weaker teams. I don't want to get too harsh, but he's at 59% pass completion percentage in the opposition half. So those are when he's playing those dangerous passes. This is a guy who's very creative. He has a ton of assists this season. He can take some set pieces, which is also going to drag that completion percentage down. But he's just special on the ball. It's 6 assists this season, 3.1 tackles and interceptions per 90. This guy, he is just so good. This is a guy that you want on the ball constantly. And I think that you get the two of them for 40 million. Rocco Reitz you get for 30. And I think you might be able to sneak Rocco Reitz for less. His wages are going to be high. Lennon Miller's won't, though. Lennon Miller will be on less wages than Giovanni Reina. He can maybe play a touch of 10, but this is a guy who you want at the number 8 position and you want on the ball constantly. This is, he's just so good. I don't know how else to put it. Brian, do you want to stick with Timber, or can I sway you into my 2-for-1 deal?
I think like if you're going for rights, I think
Did I
I
tell you
want
that Lennon Miller was 6 feet tall?
nice. I think that maybe a compromise here would be going, for example, for a player like Joe Bellingham, possibly maybe for that 8 role alongside a player like Wrights, because you're maybe paying closer to 45, 40, 42 for both of them. And I think with Bellingham, you do have, obviously very much already proven as well in the English Championship. I mean, granted, it's not a top flight league, but it is still a very difficult league to play in. Overall, once again, that is a contract until 2028. But from what I've seen, Sunderland is willing to part ways with him for around 22. So, what was the price you said for rights?
For rights, I was gonna put him like 30 to 25,
So,
25
for
to
example,
30.
yeah, you put both of them for 25 and 22, and I think you have a solid midfield pairing there alongside, or a solid array of midfielders alongside a player like Ben Zuzi, in my opinion.
I want Lennon Miller. I want Lennon Miller. I think
At
his
the end of the day,
contract
you're the one putting this
expires.
stuff on the paper. So
His contract expires in 2026. I just want you to believe. I want the passion. I don't know.
I'm a big Timber fan. I don't know, man. I'm trying here. I'm trying here.
We can come back to this after the attacker because
No, it's totally fine. We can make the decision now. If you feel you need to make that executive decision, go ahead. That's fine.
I don't know. Because
I'm telling
I'm not in love with Rocco Wrights. So
I
we
also
could
feel like if you're paying 30 million for rights already,
yeah.
this is my thought process. I think you can get Timber for less than 40. So I want Dortmund to kind of, at least personally, I want them to kind of stray away from, just being like, all right, full budget option. Because at the end of the day, the average price of players is going up. The
Yeah.
price that they're buying them out of their contracts.
I think the price of players has started to stall because the TV rights deals have stalled. We have 170 million left. We have to sign a number 10 still, and we have to sign a winger. So if we think about it, I think we could go Quentin Timber plus Lennon Miller for 50,
45 or 50,
total.
yeah.
I think we could split the difference there with some Champions League bonuses for Quentin Timber. We could do that again.
Sounds good.
So we'll call that
doing business.
Call that 47.
Sounds good.
For the two.
There.
So we'll go 8 for Lennon Miller, and I'm so bad at math. That gives us 39 for Timber.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think 39 is very much doable. At the end of the day, with him, it's going to come down to what Dortmund can offer in terms of how they convince him of the project. So, for example, depending on who we have coming in as our head coach, which I think we'll talk about later, like if you have someone like Hones coming in, for example, I think that guy can convince a player like Timber to come in and play for Dortmund. So it's going to depend on that too. So. But I'd be very happy to pencil him in.
Okay, so we got Lennon Miller for 8 and Urian Timber for 39 and Quinton, excuse me. So I'm definitely a believer in Kilwattian, but like I've said this before, I'll say it again. With academy players, guys with under 500 senior minutes, you don't hold spots for them.
Right.
Lennon Miller, like it's a much worse league. It's arguably even worse than the third tier, but this is a guy with 2,000 minutes in it. And the third tier, like, maybe the average is higher, but Celtic and Rangers are very good teams compared to any third tier division side in Germany. So let's move on. Do you want to do the winger or the 10 first? I'm going to quickly look at I think my 10 targets are maybe the more pricey guys. I have budget options on the wing, so I think we go with the number 10 first.
We could go with 10 first, yeah. I think my wingers are more expensive, so.
Oh.
And I think this changes a little bit because we're keeping Brandt, right? So.
Yeah. I think in terms of Brandt, I just think you can get the value of the rest of his wages and let him leave on a free. Or sign him for a considerably reduced wage. My goal is to sign a guy that can compete for minutes with Julian Brandt in the near future. I have one guy that I wrote in in Sfera Nipan that I kind of wanted. Like I like the
I
player.
like him.
He's supposed to be like the best ever, like the next elite prospect. But we want a guy that we think. I think we both want a guy. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think we want a guy that can take minutes off Julian Brandt sooner rather than later. And Sfera Nipan, we may then, if we sign him, we may be asking Julian Brandt to be a starter for 2 more seasons, which I don't think we want to do. So, who is your number 10 option?
So I'll go through, I guess, because I had a lot of options for this, but I'm gonna go through I'll go through three, and they are, I guess, it changes a little bit because we are keeping Brandt, because I was actually assuming that we might possibly get rid of him. But first and foremost, Martin Baturina, Dinamo Zagreb. I think he's a great shout. 22 million market value. I think it'd be more closer to 25 or 30.
This is where we should have compromised. I knew you were gonna say the name. I should have gone for him over Quinton Timber. I don't know.
Well, there you go.
But, we could pencil it out. It's only penciled in.
We could, but it really depends on what you're offering him once again, because this is a player, granted it is Dinamo Zagreb, they do play Champions League. We're not going to be in the Champions League, so that is something to take into account.
Well,
I do think
right now we're on the Europa League budget, so we're still giving him some European minutes.
Yes.
And he's a guy who I don't think can start every game, but he's a guy who can take minutes off Julian Brandt right away.
And eventually become the main starter, and I 100% agree with that. I mean, he has a strong footballing IQ, really good eye for a pass. He's a very good progressor of the ball, too, 4.65%.
Pressing, he's probably better than Brandt, too, right? Because when I've seen him play for the Croatian national team, he can run a bit. Obviously, when he's going to be at Borussia Dortmund, he may not be on whatever they give the Croatian national team players. But we'll definitely come back to Baturina in a second. I just want to hear your other two names first.
Sure. So I had McAtee from Man City, James McAtee. I think once again also a very good option. He does have senior minutes for Man City. With his performances, his price goes up. So once again, that's closer to like a 30 million signing. If I had to choose between him or Baturina, I'd probably go for Baturina, because you could probably give him lower wages as well.
For sure.
So you're not looking at, that Premier League tax that we're talking about. And then the last one is one that we've talked about. And once again, this is probably going to be the most expensive one. And that's Magnus Akilucci. I'm probably
Akliush, I believe.
Akliush, the AS Monaco attacking midfielder. I mean, his market value is closer to 40 million. So you're looking at a really big dish layout there. Probably a Dortmund record signing to get him through the door. His contract is also up in 2028. So it's not anytime soon whatsoever. He has 5 goals and 8 assists in Liga this season. 4.52.
I don't think you need to pitch me Makliush, because I think
just for our listeners, because I do very much like the player as well. So that I
think we can just consider Borussia Dortmund priced out. But no, we like Makliush, but we didn't make Champions League football, so we have to look for guys that I think are gonna be a little cheaper. And one of these guys, I think his wages will still be high. But I think they wouldn't be any higher than Akliush's, but the fee is going to be half that. And this is another guy that can play a tiny bit of 8 if he really wanted. And we can erase Quinton Timber, put in Baturina and this guy for, I think, considerably less. The wages, I think, would raise from just signing Timber. But I think Baturina and Enzo Mio coming in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, he does have that, what is it, another 18 million?
18 to 20 million euro release clause.
So, I mean, having both of them would be quite enticing. So, I'm willing to back down from the Timber talk, if we can get my boy Baturina in with a little bit of Mio on the side. I think that's a good deal.
My other shouts were Alberto Malero, who's at Las Palmas. I'm a big Las Palmas fan. What can I say? Had to hold down the La Liga love for our editor Ali. His market value is 25 million, but he's in the relegation zone. His take on success percentage could be better. Maybe that's because he's 5 feet tall. like our editor Ali. Maybe that's because he's playing for a relegation team. Sorry, I had to throw in the stray after the compliment. But this is a guy who also only has 2.5 expected assisted goals, no assists, so that could also bring his value down. But I think Mio and Baturina, like, we want to save some of our budget. So, like, if we get rid of, like, the 39 for Timber, and we bring in Baturina and Mio, and I think that we still have Pascal Gross. So we can play a 2 of Benzuzi and Gross, Miller off the bench as backup. We still have Ozchin off the bench as backup for a little bit of physicality if we need it. But we think Benzuzi's ready to start. I think we get rid of Timber, and we can play if we want to keep, like, Pascal Gross's minutes down so he doesn't hit that extension. I think a guy like either of Mio or Baturina could really play that 8 role, or you could play.
They can, yes.
Like, these are both guys that press. These are both ball secure guys. These are both guys that can do ball progression. So I think we cross off Timber for 39. We bring in Mio for 20, and Baturina. What did Sucic go for?
He went for 14, and that was the curious thing for me, because everyone was saying that he would be going for a lot more than that. So I was shocked to see that 14 to Inter, because, but with Baturina, that is their star player right now.
Yeah. When does his contract expire?
2028, so you're not looking at anytime soon.
So you want to call him 20 again? Because
I would say 25.
I think if Sucic is going for 14, I think you can say to Baturina, like, we're not going to, like, I think if you're Baturina, you're going to go, you let him go for 14 and a half. Why aren't you going to let me go? And Baturina's, like, still very young, especially for number 10, because creativity develops later, but he's 22. Like, this isn't a guy who's going to want to play in Croatia the rest of his career. And to have a name like Borussia Dortmund come in and offer 20, I think that's doable.
So we can put it down for 20. I think they're going to probably want a little bit more just because of how little they let Sucic go for, to kind of balance it out. But we can put 20 for now. That'd be great if we could get him for 20.
No. I think you've convinced me enough that I'll meet you somewhere in the middle and call it 24.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we'll put in Baturina for 24, and Mio, we're going to put, like, the fee is only going to be 18 to 20, but we're going to put him down for 22 off the budget to save a little bit of wages as well, because his wage is he's going to demand, like, a hefty wage. Yeah. So that'll put us, let's see where our budget is. -8, subtract the 4, and we are left with 116 million euros for, is it 2 positions we have left?
We still have wing, center back, and possibly left back, right back.
I don't have any left back, right backs, because for this we're keeping Jan Koto. I think the club isn't. The sound isn't necessarily set on that, but I think I'm happy with Svensson. Like, I would sell Bensebaini, but we have so many outgoings already for this.
I'm very much happy with Svensson. So
I think our fans don't need to hear us talk for the second hour. We're going to go Svensson in.
So that's like
at left back. We'll subtract that as 10 million. Because that has to be budgeted for. Give me 1 sec. I just have to type it into our notes that we signed Svensson. So we have a winger, and then a center back, and potentially a manager. So let's start with the winger.
Sure. So I had a fair few options here as well, but I believe I narrowed it down to 4. I'll start off with the first one being very much, I know it's a stretch, I know it's not going to happen, but I got to mention him because I think he's a fantastic player. Takefusa Kubo. That is my dream signing. Dream signing at the wing. I think he is very good going forward, can very much take his man on. He's very much proved for Sociedad that he can be a very impactful player. Can also play at 10, but considering we've already signed both Mio and Baturina, we don't need a third player that can play in that position. But I did think that his ability to play both those positions would be good. And I know I've criticized Brandt in the past about, seeing as he can play out on the wing, meanwhile him being more as a 10. I think Kubo is very much more proficient at playing both positions. I think he has the pace for it. I think he has the creativity for it, and he has the dribbling for it at this point. As we've talked about on the pod, one of the things that Brandt has fallen back on is that dribbling. Or excuse me, not the dribbling as much, but more so being able to take on his man and get through the defense in the way that he was in the past. So
that is correct.
But anyway, so I'm not going to put him in there because that is a very expensive signing. Johan Bakayoko, I think, is one of the obvious answers because I think the fee was closer to 35 million or something like that.
25 to 30 was the rumor that he was going to be available for this summer. The concern is he's not played as much, and when he's played, he's not been as good this year.
Yeah.
But that could just be because he wanted to leave last year, and then the form turned down because he's not as happy. I still believe in the player.
I'll keep it to one more, and I think this is my choice for signing, and that's Malik Fofana from Lyon. I think he's having a really good season for them. He's relatively young. Well, not relatively young. He's young. He's 19 years old. His market value is around 25 million, and the contract's around 28. I do think that you get him closer to that 25 to 30 million fee just because Lyon is going to need to sell. And I know that we had problems with the whole Cherky thing, and I hate dealing with Texter because obvious reasons. I think he just is a very talented winger, very good at progressing the ball, can put a cross in as well. So, I mean, especially if we're playing like a player like Girassi up front, you want your wingers to be able to service, not only dribble and shoot. And I think he is a very good option for that because he does have that diverse skill set. So that's going to be my shout, I think. I'm going to go with Fofana for mine.
I'd rather go to Bakayoko just because I think it's more attainable. Like, I think one of the issues for Dortmund signing Fofana this summer would essentially be that a Premier League club with Champions League football, I think, is very likely to come in for him. I think they still have a chance at Champions League football too, and that would go a long way to helping their debt issues. But I just think the bridge has been burned by the way Texter handled not honoring his word to his players.
Yeah.
If your boss tells you something, don't believe it, I guess, is the lesson we should all be taking from that. People who employ people are not generally the best towards their employees.
I've been lucky in that sense, thankfully, but I digress.
I've had good and bad luck, but clearly Ray and Cherokee has had some bad luck there. So I'll move on to my three shouts. It's Johan Bakayoko is just so obvious to me. He does play on the right wing. We've seen Karim Adeyemi on the left be very good. We've seen Maxi Bayer on the left be very good. I might want to bring in two wingers, because we still haven't really signed a guy to really replace Malin, and you've seen like if there was an injury. So if we're going 1-for-1 with Gittins, that's leaving us with three guys unless Cole Campbell becomes a senior guy. And what did I just say about counting on academy players who have under 500 professional minutes? So I'm going to go with a guy with a lot of professional minutes in Ben Doak. He's at Middlesbrough, on loan from Liverpool. I don't know when his contract expires, but he signed a long-term contract extension in 2023. That's from the club website. So I would imagine it expires in 26 or 27. 8.9 XG plus expected assists. His low dribble success rate is probably down to the fact he's a child playing in a very good league, but the way he's getting his expected goals and expected assists is a lot more through creativity. Like, he is one of the guys that's carrying the ball a ton, who is like better than everyone else. Like if you look at any chart, any statistics that are comparing U20 wingers in terms of ball carrying and expected assists, it's like Ben Doak and that's it. Like he's up in the top right of every chart for that. Like he is dribbling a ton. So even though he's not successful, he's doing it at a high volume. So if you ask him to be a little bit more reserved, he can probably do that. The issue is if Liverpool wants him to be the Mo Salah replacement, or if they trust him enough, or if they believe in him enough. And the issue with that is that Liverpool is very smart. So if they're willing to sell him for, and they believe in his talent, it's not going to be for cheap. And I think they do believe in him. I don't think you also have the situation where like Mo Salah is Mo Salah. So if Mo Salah leaves, like they're going to need a signing, potentially Jamie Gittins, even though he plays on the wrong side. But yeah, I think you can get Ben Doak. He's also played on the right wing, but like I said, I think Bayer and Adeyemi can both play anywhere across the front line at this point. And maybe if you put him out on the left, he's able to cut in and shoot in a way that's a lot more similar to Jamie Gittins. The other guy I have here is just 17, and he's from Belgium. Durnville has not hit the ground running. I understand that. But this guy is playing a lot more than Durnville was in his half season at Anderlecht. And he's a year older, so next year he's going to be turning 18. Just 17 this year, though. His contract's up in 2027. He's at Genk. His market value is $7 million. He has 4 goals and assists from 6.42 expected. So him underperforming there should allow you to maybe get him for a bit less. And he's over 1 dribble per 90, which isn't crazy, but wait till you hear this, Brian. He's fouled 1.6 times per game. So he's getting fouled a lot. He plays a fairly free role. He's also on the right wing, but because of his free role, he's often ending up on the left or in the center of the pitch. He's not very fast. He's probably very cheap. Ben Doak's market value, according to Transfermarkt, is 10. I think you have to pay 30. Ben Doak's my guy for this. I think he's genuinely would be the best attacking signing we've had since Holland. He'd be the best winger signing we've had since Sancho or Dembele, because he's going to come in and be ready to give you a real contribution right away. I think Bakayoko would probably be too, because we haven't had some great signings in that area. But I think that actually no, because Karim Adeyemi's coming good. So maybe not, but
you didn't give us a name
the
for
best
the guy
signing,
from
Karetsis,
Belgium.
Konstantinos Karetsis.
Karetsas, yes. Familiar with that guy. Very much familiar with that guy.
I think we like my Ben Doak pitch, and we like your pitch, and I think we go with Johan Bakayoko, to be honest.
I mean, yeah. If you want like a ready-made player, then I think Bakayoko is a good choice. I think Doak is also very much a fine choice. So I'm actually open to either or at this point. So if you want to go with Doak, we can go with Doak.
We can put Ben Doak on the graphic in a Liverpool kit.
And you said 30 for him?
Yeah, I think you have to pay 30. I think he'd be like, I think he's good. I think Liverpool believe he's good. So if you're getting him, you're gonna have to put a bag down.
And you think for sure that this player would be able to hit the ground running and be one of our starters right away? Or
yeah,
like,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Like,
Okay.
if you like, he's gonna finish with a ton of minutes this season. I think he's already over 2,000. But like, the championship is good. Like, the championship's a very good league.
Yeah.
And he has like some of the best stats in it.
Right.
The only worry is like if he's kind of just like gonna be purchased by a different team from the UK. But it's 0.23 expected assisted goals per 90, 0.46 non-penalty XG plus expected assisted goals. So like, he's a very, very good player. I think like if he comes into Borussia Dortmund and puts up those exact numbers, like for reference, that's about where Julian Brandt is this season in terms of expected goals and expected assists. It's right around where Maxi Bayer is. It's not where you want it to be right now, but I think he'll be a year older next year. The Bundesliga, I think, is very similar. He'd be playing in a more dominant team in theory, because we're fixing Borussia Dortmund. Watzke's out, Kale's out, and all the problems with the backroom staff have been fixed. So I think for us, like progressive carries per 90 it's almost 7. Like he's in the top 1% for progressive carries. Like the issue with him is right now he's dribbling so much and he's not necessarily efficient at it. If he's able to pick and choose his moments, all of a sudden that might go up. His movement in the box is good because he's getting those shots. He can play two ways, like 3 goals, 7 assists. He's overperforming his expected assist. He's underperforming his XG. Like this is a guy I think next year, not only does he hit the ground running, but I think he might be able to take a step forward from these numbers while moving up in competition because he is going to be getting older. Like maybe he takes a little bit of time, but like this is a guy who's also in the top 1% of all attacking wingers for progressive passes received. So his touch is great. His dribbling ability is great. His ball carrying, great. Like he's not a flawless player yet, but very soon he could be.
I think for the purposes of obviously very much a good player, but also in terms of entertainment value, let's go with Doak because I do think Bakayoko is the safe answer. But I think let's go with Doak with that just for funsies and just because that does sound like a very exciting player that Dortmund could probably build on and really get the best.
Yeah, and in reality, like Liverpool may say regardless no, but they've also committed so many wages and so many transfer fees to so many senior attacking players that there is a chance. I think they keep Bendo because I think he's really good. But we'll see what happens
for
there.
our purposes. He's a
for our purposes, he'll be a Dortmund player because we put down so much money. We gave them a right of first refusal, and yeah, so we're going to be able to keep Ben Doak, and we're going to be moving on to center back with a lot of money left, believe it or not.
We do have a lot of money left, but that's very much in line with how Dortmund likes to operate. We don't like spending everything that we make anyway, so I think that's very much in line with reality there. So I think we did a good job there.
Yeah,
I have 2 shouts for center back. The first one being David Hanchko, also an Eredivisie player. Age 27, market value of 35 million. Contract expires in 2028. So I do think this would be a very expensive signing. But I do think, especially if Dortmund do look to get rid of a player like Sule, or even in the hypothetical, let's say like Anton leaves or something, right? Because, he doesn't fit the idea of whoever the next coach is going to be. I think you can have a little bit more leeway in a situation like this and actually get a solid player to partner Schlotterbeck.
The issue with Hansko partnering Schlotterbeck has an excellent right foot, but he is a left-footed player, and so is Hansko.
That's also very dependent on the coach that we have in place, because some managers don't necessarily care about left-footed being on the left side, right-footed being on the right side. I know that is a trope, and that is something that a lot do care about. But in a situation like this, I think you are talking about a player that is also very two-footed as well. And I don't think there'd be an issue putting him on the right side or anything like that of a center-back pairing. I think he'd do just fine. I think he's experienced enough to weather that completely fine. You're talking about a player that, just like the center-backs that we've already mentioned and Schlotterbeck as well, is able to play out from the back very professionally, very good at launching those long balls over. I know I've said on the pod that I want Dortmund to kind of move away from that sort of like quarterback-esque play at times, but I do think it's kind of just like almost like something that, especially this season, that we've done when we've been panicky. But having that in your locker is not a bad thing, I don't think, and I think it's very important to have that in your locker, especially as a center back. Defensively, very solid overall, very physical player as well. He has 6.13 progressive passes per 90 and 4.3 progressive carries per 90. So I think those numbers are things that you'd like to hear, Eli, with your defensive players. So he is very much a forward-thinking player, and I think that's something that Dortmund have looked for in their center backs. But he's not my only option because I do think there is another player that we can look at, and that's Konstantinos Kourelakis. I believe his contract is until 2029.
You love players that just moved.
You know what? But I'm out here looking for the talent no matter what.
He is a good player.
He is a good player, and I think that once again, this is my second Wolfsburg player of this episode, and I'm cool with rating them, so I don't feel bad. Whatever, I feel worse about rating Stuttgart.
I love their coach.
Hasenhüttl, yes.
Yeah, I wanted Hasenhüttl last year, and I got denied, and now
Alas.
I was told he wasn't that good. Now he's got a shit dog. I can't say the next word, but he has a terrible team ahead of us in the table. So,
but like I was saying, 15 million value. I think you are going to have to obviously overpay because of that contract, but he's a little bit different in terms of his profile. He's not exactly your ball-playing type center back. He's more of a stopper, which I don't think is necessarily the worst thing for Dortmund to have, because especially if you have a player like Schlotterbeck
and Emre Can.
But we're talking about with Emre Can leaving, right? But if you have that one player that does like to go forward, it's not a bad thing to have that sort of last line of defense, last-ditch player, the way that Kourelakis likes to play. And I'd be very much happy to see him join because very good defensive minutes, far more conservative in terms of his play. But once again, if you have a player like Schlotterbeck that does like to push forward, it doesn't hurt to have that last line of defense kind of hanging back. So I'd be happy with either or. But once again, both are going to be kind of expensive.
I think you said stopper, meant sweeper, really threw me there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was talking quickly.
It's all good. It's all good. It just threw me. Maybe it threw our audience. But yeah, you mean the sweeper, like he's cleaning up in behind so Schlotterbeck can step up?
Yes.
Yeah, because Emre Can, that's why I gave that Emre Can shout, because Emre Can is the stopper, stepping up out of the line, and I think that is what Schlotterbeck is better at.
Right.
And that's what you saw a lot of last year, and then, there was just a lot more space in behind last year. Anyway, I'm not entirely convinced by my shouts. Like, I don't know what Kourelakis would cost. I think it would be a lot because they, like, what did Lacroix? I don't think went for a ton, but Van de Ven did.
Yeah, right? Van de Ven did. I believe he went closer to 40, but actually I think Lacroix also went for around 30, 35, something like that as well. Don't quote me on that because I don't remember. But did he go for less?
No, I just think that I'm out on spending that much money.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be spending that much necessarily. But I think Kourelakis for like 22, I think is completely doable.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Because we're looking at their past history of doing it, and they held on to, like, amid interest, they held on to Lacroix for an extra year because they'd sold the other guys, and they still got like 30, 35 it ended up being, which is a very good fee. And so I think they just signed this guy. I think next summer he might be available for 30 at the age of 22, but I find it hard to imagine that they'd be selling him, especially if they get back into Europe. Wolfsburg have that VW money. I have three guys here, one of which is 23, Cesar Torrega. The issue with him is Valencia contracted through 2028. I have a guy, Javi Rodriguez. The issue with him is he's short. Torrega, 6'4", the tallest of the guys I'm about to name. Javi Rodriguez, like, he's short, but he's very good. He's playing for, I think, Celta de Vigo or Getafe. It's escaping me at the moment. It's the only player I didn't write down his club for. But I think with the height, I think we're both out. Because I think one of the issues we've seen this year is we've ended up sneaky short when, especially Bensebaini's off the pitch, because we have two short midfielders or two guys that aren't great in the air. and our wingers aren't great in the air, and our 10's not great in the air, and Ryerson's not the best in the air. Koto definitely isn't at right back. So we've added a little bit of height with some of our signings. So I'm just going to look at that now. So Banzuzi has height. Lennon Miller has some height. Jean Garcia is not short. He is pretty tall. He's 6'3", so he'll be able to like match what Kobel's able to do in the air. But Mio is not tall. Baturina not tall. Doak not tall. We still need a little bit of height, especially from our center backs, just to dominate in the air, because we have some guys in the squad that are going to be liabilities on set pieces, and we do need to improve in that area. And that's why I'm very happy with Banzuzi and Lennon Miller coming in, because we get a little bit more height, a little bit more physicality from our midfield, but we're still pretty small. So adding a 6'4" center back like Torrega would be good. I also have a 6'3" Spanish, but he's a dual national. He did re-sign a new contract, but it's only to 2027, so he just re-signed it. This is literally just because Peter Lim wants to make money. So they gave Jarek Gazir. We have the poll. You can pronounce it. Goshorovsky. Sorry for butchering the language of your people, but
I'll forgive you.
he's a lot taller. He is left-footed, but he is only 20 years of age. But my concern is that I want a guy that can start for Borussia Dortmund, and if you're going to start for Borussia Dortmund, I'd prefer you have a right foot. This is the shortest of the three guys I'm going to really believe in my pitch. Gazierowski, or I'm messing it up again. Goshorovsky is very active defensively. So if Nico Schlotterbeck's not playing at a certain point, or you want to sub him out and keep the same system in the Europa League, Europa Conference League, I think that he'd be a great guy to kind of keep everything the same around that player swapping out, and Nico Schlotterbeck finally gets a little bit of rest. But I think my number one option is Joel Ordonez. His contract's also up in 2028, but he's not with a club with as much money as Wolfsburg. They are going to probably be in the Champions League again next season, so they do have a little bit more money because of the new TV rights deals with the Champions League and stuff, and that's Joel Ordonez. Like, this guy, I think, has a very good profile. I think that he's not necessarily there yet mentally. He's still very, very young for center back. At just 20, he has 1,000 UCL minutes this season, beat Atalanta, and is part of like a very young right side of the team. So when he's playing, he's always on like the more exposed side of defense, because they have two different right backs at Club Brugge, and they're both 19. Says is very good. When Says went out, Ordonez kind of got exposed. So I think putting him next to a guy like Julian Ryerson would really help him out, because then all of a sudden he's not having to defend wide as much. He's not getting caught getting men passed on to him in the box. And I think you could really hide some of those defensive fragilities. I think he'd really be more of a sweeper than Nico Schlotterbeck, so you could partner very well there. He's very physical, so he can carry the ball up the pitch well, which is something I think I want from both of my center backs. So Torrega can do that as well. He's got great progressive carry numbers. But yeah, I think Ordonez, 1,000 UCF minutes, market value of 18. I think you get him for 25, which I think is, and I think he's a little bit more of a realistic get even without Champions League football, because he's only in Belgium. And like, if Borussia Dortmund come calling, and we know that Borussia Dortmund scout Ecuador because he's from the same club as the 16-year-old we just signed, who's a number 10 as well, who won't be coming. Justin Lerma, thank you. Justin Lerma won't be coming until the next year, but if we're able to bring in an Ecuadorian before him that could help Justin Lerma. And also, like you're saying, Eli, we have a little bit of a language issue. I'm not sure anyone at the club speaks Spanish. Actually, we already brought in Jean Garcia, so we have a Spanish speaker there to help him assimilate in the defense, and the two of them will be able to speak Spanish with each other, and they'll be able to learn German together, and I think that'll really help our defense gel. So, yeah, Joel Ordonez is going to be my shout for center back.
My one concern is, and granted, maybe some people might find this superficial, is that we're looking at a very young, like we're going from a lot of experienced players. Granted, they haven't performed to the level that we would have wanted them to a lot of young players in our how to fix here, and that is my one concern. Just because at the end of the day, you do need someone to steer these players. And I know Dortmund in the past has done completely fine with younger squads, but I just wonder, perhaps especially, let me put it this way, especially if we don't have European football, I think that's okay because you're just weathering the league and the cup. You're not really weathering those like.
I think in terms of age, I just want to remind you, we still have Pascal Gross, who's in his mid-30s. We still have Julian Brandt, who's on, like, he's a club leader. He's going to be about to be 30. Nico Schlotterbeck is now going to be in his age 26 season next year. So you still have some age there. You have Valdemar Anton, who's our other center back. You have Nicolas Sula at the club. Like, we didn't kick out any of these guys. We got Remy Bensebaini at left back, who's 30. You have Ryerson, who's 30. So, like, we're essentially trying, like, from my perspective, like, I did worry about that a little bit in midfield. We get in Bacharina, who's 22 instead of 20. That was something I was looking for. Similar age profile with Mio and Svensson. So our only real, like, Jean Garcia, 23, like, this is a guy who's had 2 full senior seasons already. Granted, only one in a top flight. Ben Doak, only 1 senior season. But, like, if you're looking in terms of teenagers brought in, we've only done 2. Ordonez is 20, but he's got 1,000 Champions League minutes. But if you want to go up to Tarrega, who's 23, I could understand that. But at that point, I'd probably go to your Hansko.
I think Ordonez, I think, is a better option there. And I guess my line of thinking was more so if Sule or Anton leaves, but I guess, yes, in the framework of our how to fix, we are keeping them at the club for one reason or another. So I guess getting in a younger player actually doesn't hurt at all because you do have those older heads there.
Yeah, I think you almost want that younger player so you have someone who, Sula leaves, he can step up and play an even bigger role.
Because
Anton ages out.
Was more so my shout if we got rid of somebody, and considering we're not, I guess the younger player actually, like, that's totally fine, and it's a cheaper option too. So once again, it's more in line with reality. So I'm cool with him.
I don't know if it. See, I think if the right club got interested, I think it could end up being more expensive. That's why I got kind of like those budget guys around, like Gajarowski. I'm getting closer.
You're getting better at it.
So you got Gajarowski there, who I think, like, his market value is only 3 million less than Ordonez, but he's left-footed, and I want a guy who's eventually going to be my starting right center back. So then you have Tarrega, Ordonez, Javi Rodriguez. Javi Rodriguez, the issue with him is his height. Maybe he's grown. He is 21. Maybe you want Tarrega because he's about to, like, have a breakout and the passing's there, but it's just not shown for Valencia. I'm not a good enough scout to really know that, and I haven't seen enough of Valencia this season. Ordonez, like, the passing, I think it's not going to be quite there yet. Like, I'm just not really concerned about playing with Anton for a season and, like, really rotating Ordonez and Anton next to Schlotterbeck, and then keeping Anton and Sula as, like, potential options for my, like, left center back when I want to give Nico Schlotterbeck a game.
I think I'm still, like, I think you've convinced me of Ordonez, honestly. because even if you're paying a little bit more, like it's still within the budget that we mentioned. I think out of the ones you've mentioned, and even you said this yourself, I think he's the most likely to really be that replacement long term, and that top player for us for years to come. And I do agree with you on the Anton point as well. I think we're looking at a player that, once again, like a lot of the players in the squad, is struggling because the general squad is struggling. There is no direction. There is no brand of football that we're playing right now. So I think um, even paying a little bit more for Ordonez isn't bad because we still have the leftover. And I think that's also going to come into play because I think we were also going to talk about coaches. So I think in terms of that, I'll save what I'm going to say on that, but I still, Ordonez still has my vote.
Okay, so we'll put in Ordonez. I
I don't know
think
how
it
to pronounce
is.
it, so.
I think it's
Ordonez.
Ordonez because I think it's the Enya, but I
Okay.
didn't type in the
Got it.
Enya, so I may have
Okay.
been saying it a little British rather than in my true Spanish tongue. Um, but yeah, I also think that'll help Justin Lerma, and that'll help. I think we pencil him in. We'll call it 26. And that'll also allow us to let Sula leave on loan to make space for the wages if we really need that, and maybe Filippo Mane is a real person that the club actually employs. So then our final position, we have 50 million left, and we just need a manager. I think there's only one name.
I know who I think you're gonna say, but I actually think I have a different shout. But go ahead.
Oh,
Go
go
on.
first. No, go first. Go first.
Uh, More and more, I've been very much leaning towards the possibility of a Thomas Frank. And the reason I say that is because if we're looking at, I guess, like the realistic situation, that's not going to happen because that 12 million release clause that he has is very high. But within the context of what we're talking about here and how much money we've saved, I think that he would be very much a good shout. Very good at working with young players, which is a lot of kind of what we've brought in. It's a very high pressing, energetic system that he plays. So we might get that energy back on the pitch for Dortmund that we kind of think about when we think about the type of football that the club want to play. And I don't know, I just think he's done great with Brentford, and I think he'd just be a very good, very experienced shout and someone that we could realistically build around. Because obviously, I'd very much be, and not to steal your thunder, very happy with Sebastian Hoeneß as well. But
I don't think you can steal my thunder on that one, Brian. I think that's the only name on anyone's mouth.
That's the main one that people would be thinking about. Very much, I think would be obviously a very good option as well.
Maybe
But
I'm
I
going
do
back
think,
to Hasenhüttl. You don't know.
I mean, honestly, you know what? I'd be happy with that too. I think all three, if you put them all in a pot and you pick one out of a hat, I think they're all going to do a job. But I do really like what Frank has done at Brentford with such a young team, and particularly because we're looking at a lot of young players coming into this team. I think he'd be a fantastic manager, fantastic coach to build around long term.
I don't necessarily know how many teenagers he's done it with. He's getting a lot of it's 23. Like he gets a lot of guys right around 23.
That to me
And
is still young, though. I know the age for when
but
they theoretically hit their prime
Yeah.
is getting lower.
I mean,
but
we
I
do
still think that's
actually
very
we
young.
we sneaky have a lot of guys that we signed that are about to hit 23 because we are really smart at what we're doing. Because that's the age that attackers start to pop. So compliment to us there, honestly. But I just think that Thomas Frank, it's a good shout, but how do you get away from Seb Hoeneß? How there's this is the guy. This is the guy in terms of managers that are attainable for Borussia Dortmund. Xabi Alonso, yes, we have a bigger budget than Leverkusen, but he's already won the league in Germany with a
I
team
don't think
that's not
Alonso is
named
anywhere near
Bayern.
attainable.
So exactly, why would he want to? He can go anywhere he wants in the world.
I'm just thinking in like a situation where another team that does have Champions League does come calling for someone like Onas, because I think you do need you need more than one option, and Dortmund could put like all their eggs in a basket, go after Onas, but he could still say no.
For Seb Honas though, my pitch to him, like he's currently got Stuttgart in 10th, just one position above Borussia Dortmund. However, Brian, Stuttgart this season, they're 5th in expected goals difference. Borussia Dortmund is 3rd. We're the two unluckiest teams this season, but I think the answer for both teams is like Dortmund got so much luck, and at a certain point, after the last 2 years of being very lucky, we've had a bit of negative variance. Kobel struggled a bit, and we've had some terrible coaching. With Seb Honas' Stuttgart, it's very easy to look at because you're looking at 37.3 expected goals allowed, 43 conceded. It's been a bad year to be a Bayern goalie, and little secret agent they got over there has helped out. No, I'm not saying that. He's had a down year. Neubel, former Schalke guy, so actually I can say bad things about him and it'll be okay because it makes sense on the podcast. He's a Schalke Academy player. Anyway, so Stuttgart have been exceptionally unlucky in terms of conceding goals, and also this is all going on around the fact that they lost like 50 million in center backs that they replaced with a guy who started last week for 1 million. And this guy whose name I'm forgetting from the Netherlands. They signed Amin Al-Dakil. He missed the entirety of preseason and a lot of the first half of the season with injury. So the negatives there, I don't care about. This is a guy who took Angelo Stiller and really got him playing his best football.
He's now linked to Real Madrid.
From a very young age. Like, this guy could go to City. He could go anywhere in the Premier League. He's not going to want to redo it again, even if Stuttgart get back into the Champions League picture, because it'd just be exhausting to every season he's lost his best players. If he he's not staying at Stuttgart if Dortmund come in, but at Dortmund it's very different when you're replacing like two center backs for 12 million at Stuttgart. You come into Borussia Dortmund and we lost Joe Bellingham for 130 million with all the add-ons, but we went out and we spent a ton of money. Like, we spent 14 million whatever wages between Sabitzer and Mecha, and we strengthened other positions in the side, and obviously did a very terrible job of doing it. But the money is there, the wages are so much higher, and at Borussia Dortmund, he'd get to work with Valdemar Anton, he'd get to work with Mio because we already signed him. He'd get to work with Nico Schlotterbeck. This guy made Chris Furyk, who's a decent Bundesliga winger, into a guy who was genuinely incredible last season. So imagine what this guy can do with Karim Adeyemi. Imagine what he can do with Maxi Bayer. This guy turned in Denis Undav and Demirovic into good players. And Demirovic, last year he scored his expected goals by so much. This year he's come back down to earth, underperforming. But yeah. Seb Honas, it's so obvious.
I'm happy with
we don't need to justify it. I mean,
for me, I'm happy with either, so that doesn't necessarily matter to me. So I'm happy with Honas. If we can get him, I wouldn't I wouldn't throw a tantrum over it.
I mean, I'm not sure who's gonna. We're very grateful if you have stuck around to hear who we picked to be our manager. Our feature-length movie right here that we're dropping once a year. Thank you so much for sticking it out with us. But yeah, Seb Honas rounds it out. That leaves us 40 million to spare. So if we don't make the Europa League, we can keep this, and every signing can be maintained without Europa League. All you have to do is convince clubs to sign Sabitzer and Sean and sell both Jamie Gittins and Gregor Kobel, because my goodness, this was a long episode. Thank you so much all for joining with us for your feature-length film. That'll do it for Turner Classic Movies. We've been Dortmund Dispatch, but thank you again. Like and subscribe because we put a ton of research into this, and we really appreciate your support in any way that you can. But that'll do it for us. Have a good one.
Jadon Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce out. Another fantastic goal by Marco Royce. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond
Jetzt
compare.
kommt das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von Inso an Götze.
Needs to lay it off. We're going to shot away. Oh, what a goal!